Welcome back, Flare community. Today we are going to dig a little bit deeper about everyone's favourite subject and hot topic within the community, taxes, and the new distribution governance vote. Now, Benny on Twitter has devised an absolutely incredible thread summarising the contents of the recently released document. Let's check it out. Flare Networks have just published a blog post informing the community about this recent change to the Spark token distribution plan. This change adds 2 more available options for early Spark holders to vote on. The governance vote will be held during the first 5 months after the network launches. However, the vote could be over faster than that if a majority threshold of Spark tokens being used by Spark holders to vote gets behind one of the new given options. So please don't feel like you're going to have to wait 5 months. Sure, it's a possibility, but it might not be the case. Before we talk about the different options available, let's recap the latest Spark token and distribution metrics. The initial total supply is 100 billion Spark. The initial inflation rate provided by the FTSO rewards program will be set at 10% each year, and this can be altered via a governance vote. The initial Spark supply will be distributed over time as follows: 38 billion for XRP holders, 25 billion for Flare Networks Limited, 20 billion for the Flare Foundation, 12 billion for the general F asset reward pool, and finally 5 billion to the dedicated Litecoin reward pool. Now, we are all familiar with the initial distribution schedule: 15% upon the launch of the Flare network, and then 85% slowly distributed over a period of time, around 3% each month. Now let's consider some of the new options. There is the default option, which means that there will be no changes whatsoever. We have the new option 1, which is buy through burn. And finally, we have option 2, which is a distribution halt. Option 1. So as we know, the initial distribution, that is basically the default option. And if a decisive decision cannot be decided by the end of the 5-month period, then the default already existing distribution schedule will remain. Now let's check out the first option below. The first new option is very similar to the default option, but adds one small detail to it, which might have important implications regarding US tax regulations. If option 1 wins the governance vote, Spark holders will have to burn a very small percentage of their received tokens to be eligible to receive the remaining 85% of the tokens over time, again at around 3% each month. And I also want to highlight that there is an option to opt out of this. You don't have to claim the remaining 85% if you do not want to. Flare Network states, the Legal Research Commission argues that the remaining distribution would then have been purchased, and thus subject to capital gains tax upon sale instead of income tax upon receipt. Now, I want to reiterate something that Mickey B. Fresh and Patty XRP recently brought up on a recent live stream. The Flare Network team obviously have a lot of money, and they are able to commission legal experts within this field to get the advice that they need. Now, there are many different Twitter accountants which also have their opinion, but for me personally, I'm going to take advice from the accountant or the firm which the Flare Network team have commissioned especially for this. There is no one that knows the Flare network better than those who created it, okay? So let's move on. If option 2 wins, which is the burn, then the initial supply of 100 billion Spark tokens will be reduced to 15 billion. Therefore, no Spark tokens will be distributed in the following months. You will simply get your 15% allowance upon network launch and nothing more. Now, this 15% will represent the whole Spark supply, meaning 85% will be burnt in all different allocations, as can be seen here. This will be the new figures. if option 2 were to be selected. As you can see, if option 2 wins the governance vote, every participating entity of the initial distribution will receive less Spark tokens upon launch, as the whole supply is reduced. Now, before we continue, I want to bring your attention to why the Flare Network team chose this distribution method. And we can just scroll down a little bit and we can jump to this particular point here. Why is the distribution structured this way? Very important. The distribution structure has been designed to help achieve a successful network launch and to provide strong incentives for network participation that builds utility. And just to clarify, this is the initial distribution method proposed, okay? It has always been our stated position that the best people to provide capital to underpin the trustless issuance of FXRP on Flare are the people who own XRP. The only way to achieve this fairly is, in our opinion, the distribution of Spark that is taking place. Rather than embracing Flare and Spark for the utility it creates, a certain percentage of people will wish to claim Spark only because they believe that it is free money. To reduce the negative effects from this dynamic, the amount of liquidity that can be put into the market at any one given time is therefore limited by the extended unlock process. So this basically means that this extended distribution period over the months will protect the holders of Spark from preventing people from immediately cashing out with this free money. In addition to limiting excess liquidity, the structure of the distribution process provides much larger rewards for participants that bring value and utility to the network. These can be participants that either already have Spark through the claim or participants that buy Spark from the people that decided to sell it. The token distribution structure means that the percentage rewards for participating early are the highest they will ever be. The rewards as a percentage then reduce in size over time as the network matures and the token distribution unfolds. This boosted rewards percentage is achieved without changing the planned total supply at all. So I can't stress this enough. With the distribution extended over multiple months, you will be able to earn a higher yield by participating in the Flare network early. And this attracts people to and incentivizes people to join the network and use it for its intended purposes. The reader might remember from the Flare white paper that the beating heart of the Flare network is the Flare Time Series Oracle, or FTSO as it's commonly known. This is the system that generates, in a decentralized fashion, certain price feeds that are important to the network. The FTSO pays out a number of newly minted Spark. This rate is set at inception to 10% each year, without compounding, of total Spark tokens. This rate then becomes a governance parameter after launch. For example, if the network starts out with 100 billion tokens on day 1, then the amount minted and distributed in the first year will be 100 billion tokens times 10%, which is 10 billion Spark. Now this is something we are very familiar with, and as we can see by this chart here, early participation in the network is highlighted to give you a higher yield. If option 2 were to be selected and 85% of the tokens were burnt, the rate would just be flat like this, which does not incentivize early participation. So that's something you should definitely consider. The Flare Time Series Oracle is set to behave from initiation of the network itself, as if the full 100 billion tokens were fully distributed and unlocked. This number will be adjusted once the claim process ends and unclaimed tokens are burned. This means that the number of tokens being minted is the same as if the distribution were to happen all at once. Hence, total supply at the end of the distribution is unchanged. Importantly, because Spark only unlocks as time progresses, an early network participant can potentially earn a much larger percentage return from the FTSO and become a more significant participant on the network by doing so, Again, this structure was designed, and I think changing it would be a very big mistake. If you are this committed to the Flare network, and you are because you're watching this video before the launch, then I feel you should get rewarded for the early participation that you will provide. And option 2 is definitely not going to help you in the long run. The staggered distribution model should act as an additional way to incentivize individuals and groups who want to be agents and data providers to Flare, and further incentivize them to participate sooner rather than later. These parties bring value and utility to the network, and the distribution model aids development and decentralization of the ecosystem. Beyond being an incentive to generate utility on Flare, the staggered distribution should also provide a strong incentive for interested participants to absorb excess liquidity from sellers. Please note, it is understood that many who hold the Spark token may not be able to directly participate in the Flare time series oracle by providing data, which is why we have the ability to delegate our vote to a data providers. Now, I will link a video above about all of this process and delegating votes to FTSO data providers. But let's continue with the theme of today's video. I want to next bring you to a thread brought to you by Hugo, the CEO of the Flare network. Here are his thoughts. It's unknown how many people would be affected by the taxation or even care about it. If it's a very large amount of the recipients, this would have a large effect on the ecosystem. Governance deals with this unknown nicely by allowing it to be quantified and expressed democratically. Regarding option 1, burn to buy, it is unknown at this point how exchanges would deal with the burn mechanism. More on this later. That is why the governance vote should be lengthy, so that exchanges can communicate to their clients what they intend to do and participants can vote with this in mind. Option 2, which is the burn of 85% of the supply, is the equivalent of dropping the total supply at the outset, but the FTSO returns will be based on the present 100 billion until or if the distribution total is changed, hence the opportunity to gain additional Spark as a percentage from the outset is even larger. If option 2 is triggered, the total supply going to all recipients, including Flare, the foundation, the reward pools, will be 15 billion. This is not a scheme to change the distribution percentages between parties, and that's something really important to remember. Hugo says, dealing with IOUs isn't our responsibility, but if option 2 occurred, it could be handled very easily by issuers that issued 100% by simply setting conversion at 6.66 IOUs for one Spark token. Now, this particularly applies to Poloniex, which I'm going to discuss a little bit later. In a network with governance, changes to the distribution timing and quantity are always possible, whether suggested by Flare or not. IOU issuers should have considered this prior to issuance, but remember, it is easily solvable. And finally, Hugo wraps up by saying he is happy to answer any questions on a Twitter Spaces next week. He's very transparent, and that is something which is very admirable. Thank you, Hugo. So let's address the elephant in the room, which is the exchanges and the IOUs. On Bitrue, the IOUs represent one Spark token. They distributed 15% of your allocation you will receive upon launch, so effectively, this change will not affect Bitrue whatsoever. The price that you can see here represents one Spark token, and for every Spark IOU you buy on Bitrue, you will receive one Spark once the network launches. Where things get slightly tricky is with Poloniex, where their representation of the Spark IOU represented one Spark token, but over the period of 2 to 3 years, as per the initial distribution method. So this means that if, and only if, option 2 is selected to burn 85% of the remaining Spark tokens, it would take 6.66 Spark IOUs on Poloniex to equate to 1 Spark. Now, as we've said before, there are reasons for why the Flare network chose to initially do this distributed method, and I'm hoping that the community will see the light and not choose to vote for option 2. Now, it's no secret that I did trade a portion of my Bitrue IOUs for the Poloniex IOUs, as they represented much better value. Now, due to this unforeseen circumstance, things may have changed, but that is only if the option 2 is voted for. I stand by my decision, and I will happily wait and see the outcome. And as I've always said, this was just my personal decision, and everyone should make their own financial decisions based on what they feel they should do. So with that being said, I want to wrap up by checking out this last little paragraph on the Flare Network blog post. Full governance proposals for these options will be drafted, including our view on the pros and cons, and released together with the legal memo upon option 1 will be based. So please don't just feel like the Flare Network team have just left you in the dark. I'm very much looking forward to both the Flare Spaces with Hugo Fillion and also this particular document in the future. This is a democracy, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion. That's something what's really admirable about the Flare network. If you hold Spark tokens, you have your say on exactly how you think the network should be run, and that way we can collectively take the direction of the majority. I can't wait to see how this pans out. So that's all I have for you in this video. Please take care everyone, and until next time, I'm out.